Alrighty, welcome to Constitution Review Part 2. Turns out this is going to be a 3-part video series. In our previous video, we looked at the Constitutional Convention, and in this video, we're going to focus on the structure of the Constitution, look at some fixes to the articles, 3 branches and the differences, preamble and the 7 articles, the amendment process. In our next video, we're going to look at the principles of the Constitution, including the Supremacy Clause, separation of powers, and the federal and federalism, and we're going to do a vocab blast. This video, here we go. In Chapter 5, Lesson 3 about the Constitution, we're going to examine the structure and how the U.S. Constitution organizes the government and how it can be changed. We're going to jump into the Constitutional Convention in how the Constitution fixes some of the structural problems with the AOC. So we're looking at the Constitutional Convention, and let's see if you remember places where the articles were broken and which item of the Constitution would fix it. So it says the Founding Fathers gathered to fix the Articles of Confederation. This was in Philadelphia, so the Philadelphia Convention is what it's actually called, which left the United States weak and broke. So instead of drawing a matching line, you're just going to try and pick it out when you're watching this in your head, and we'll read off. So I'm going to read each column first and then give you a few moments to think about what might match what. So listen to some of the weaknesses of the articles. It was a loose alliance of separate powers. The states had all the power. All states had one vote, regardless of size. No executive office to enforce the law. Only states could collect and use taxes. So what are some of the constitutional fixes? Federal government would consist of 3 branches: executive, legislative, and judicial. The national government has the power to tax. A federalist government where a central power would share authority with states. A strong national government unifying the states. A bicameral legislature. Bicameral means 2 chambers or 2 houses. A bicameral legislature made of the House and Senate. Okay, let's start matching. So let's look at the first one. A loose alliance of separate powers. Which one of these constitutional fixes is it going to be? Take a moment and look. Did you see it? You're going to go down to a strong national government unifying the states. Loose alliance to strong national unifying. Let's look at the next one. All right, states had all of the power. So remember, that's a confederal system. So a different system would be, try and find it. So you might think, because it says federal at the top of the Constitution section, that would be the answer. But that's not what it's talking about. If you go and you look at the one that matches, it's going to be a federalist government where a central power would share authority with the states. And by the way, that should say states, not states. All right, all states had one vote regardless of size. All right, so if everybody had one vote, what's going to be a thing that's going to help us out? So we have federal government consisting of different branches, power to tax, or at the bottom it says bicameral legislature made of the House and Senate. And if you remember, the House was based on proportional representation. That means the more people a state had, the more votes it got. And the Senate, each state got 2. So that's going to be one of our major compromises. That's the answer. All states had one vote under the AOC, but under the Constitution, they have this great compromise called the Great Yeah, it's called the Great Compromise, where big states and small states get to have value. All right, we have a couple left. No executive office to enforce laws. So which one of the ones left talks about different branches? That's going to be the one at the top. So under the AOC, you only have one branch, and that's the legislative branch, Congress. Under the Constitution, you're going to separate the powers and have an executive to enforce, a legislative to create the law, and a judicial to interpret and make sure that those laws match and don't violate the Constitution. And of course, we only have one left, so only states could collect and use taxes. So we have, yes, now the national government has the power to tax. This is one of those strange things that you just have to have memorized. So let's see if you can do it in less than 2 minutes. All right, so we have the Constitution. And so we're going to talk about Article 1 of the Constitution, which is about, let's see if you can guess it. That's right, the legislative branch. So the legislative branch is made up of Congress. And Congress is made up of 2 parts. One part has 100 members, 2 per state. Which one is it? The Senate. I also could guess that because the box was a lot smaller than this box. And then this group has 435 representatives, each one based on proportional representation from the states, and that's the House of Representatives. And what's their job? Makes the laws. All right, so now moving on to Article 2, which is all about the executive branch. Who's in the executive branch? Think about that. The president, the vice president, and the cabinet. A cabinet isn't like a thing that you store stuff in. So cabinet means group of advisors, and we're going to be learning more about the president's cabinet in just a few weeks. And the job of the executive branch is to enforce and carry out the laws. Last but definitely not least, Article 3 talks all about the judicial branch. And the main part of the judicial branch is the Supreme Court, though federal courts are also involved in this, but we'll be focusing on the Supreme Court. And they interpret and study the law. Back in and look at the structure. So we have the preamble, which introduces the Constitution, and it basically says, hey, what's the point of the government that we're making? What's the purpose of this government? So the next major section is going to be the articles, and there are a total of 7. Remember, we just talked about Articles 1 through 3, but in this review, we'll look at the other 4 articles as well, and they describe the branches and how the Constitution works. Lastly, we have amendments. Those are changes to the Constitution. Right now, we have a total of 27. So we're going to look at the preamble, and it has some major important purposes in the preamble. But if you remember, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, that's our first purpose right there, establish justice, that's our second, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So let's look at those purposes again and translate them maybe into more modern language. So what is the preamble trying to tell us? That we need to unite the states, a more perfect union. That we need to make sure people are treated equally, trying to keep peace and order and to protect citizens, to defend the country from attack, help guarantee people live healthy and happy lives, and then also to guarantee people's basic rights. Some of those other phrases are talking about making sure we have a fair legal system. Okay. So, which one of my 3 branches of government is this? It's the branch that carries out the law. That's right. That's the executive branch. What about this one? This branch of government interprets or explains the law. Very good, judicial. And of course, you know this one comes last. This branch of government makes the law. And that's going to be the legislative branch. Let's see if you can figure out who said each one of these statements. So what you see down here is we have 3 different branches, executive, judicial, and legislative. And we have a spot to fill in the article. Let's see if we can figure out which quote goes with which group of individuals. Floor debate on a bill is exhilarating experience and an important duty. Carolyn Cheeks Kilpatrick, a Democrat from Michigan. Who would have said floor debate on a bill? Well, in your head, you need to think about who makes the bills. A bill is just a law that isn't official yet. So, who's the maker of the law? The legislative branch. Very good. And we find that in Article 1. Let's go to our next quote. The presidency has many problems, but boredom is the least of them. Changed voices. Richard Nixon, a Republican from California. So, which one of my branches has the presidency? Very good. The executive branch, Article 2. And though we can just get from process of elimination what the last one would be, let's read through it anyway. We apply laws to facts. We do not apply feelings to facts. And that's from Justice Sonia Sotomayor. And if you notice, it doesn't say where she is from or what political party she has, because we want members of the judicial branch to be nonpartisan. We want them to be outside of the political system in the same way, in a different way rather, that we see members of the executive and legislative branch. Well, let's look at whose job it is. All right, so when we think about executive, legislative, and judicial, which is which? And they have some random jobs that you don't always realize go with that particular branch of government. So we have the executive branch, legislative, and judicial. Think about each one of their primary jobs. So, which one of these groups is going to print the money? It's going to turn out it's the legislative branch for some reason. Who enforces the law? Look at that E at the beginning. That's right, executive branch. Who decides what a law means? Maybe another word for decides could be study, interpret, judge. So you should have gotten J for judicial branch. This is one of those memorization ones. Who declares war? You think it might be one, because in the executive, you have the president who's the commander-in-chief. However, the founding fathers wanted to make sure that if the leaders want to go to war, that the majority of people have a stake, and the legislative branch is going to do that. Which one of my branches includes the president, vice president, and the cabinet? If you guessed the executive branch, you would be correct. Which one of these is divided into the House and Senate? Legislative. Which one of these groups can punish pirates? It's not what you think. The Constitution gives the legislative branch power to punish pirates like Jack Sparrow. Okay, well, this is fiction, but anyway. Who makes treaties with other countries? So that's going to be the chief executive, commander-in-chief, the head negotiator, and that is the president under the executive branch. Who can declare laws unconstitutional? We haven't talked about this branch for a while, but that is the judicial branch. Like I said in my lecture in class, if this branch is selected by the Electoral College, if it was selected by popular vote, the presidential election would have turned out very differently, because indeed the executive branch is selected by the presidency. Donald Trump got over 300 electoral votes. He needed 270 to win. And because of the structure of democracy, it is indeed the Electoral College, not the popular. Whether or not you agree with it, that doesn't really matter, because it's been part of the Constitution since the very beginning. So you can't just change it because you don't like it. You have to get enough momentum behind it to go through the constitutional amendment process, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. All right, so number 11, if the presidency were selected by popular vote, Hillary Clinton would have won by a significant amount. But it is the legislative branch that is selected by popular vote. Number 12, appoints, that means I say, this is your job. Appoints Supreme Court justices. So appointing Supreme Court justices, federal judges, and ambassadors and cabinet members. Who's doing that? You've probably seen it a lot in the news lately, because it's the executive branch that does this. So the main thing that's been in the news about the different choices for the cabinet, so the Secretary of State or the Secretary of Energy or the Attorney General, all of those things are appointed by the president. However, to go back to checks and balances, it's then going to be according to the legislative branch to approve presidential appointments. Like I said, it's not like 8:30 appointments here, sir. Number 14, who makes a State of a Union address each year? This year it's going to be a little bit different because of inauguration. Hopefully you got the clue. You should have gotten the executive branch. And lastly, who's going to collect taxes? That's another one of those ones you just got to have memorized. It's the legislative branch. So let's run down the branches of government real quick one more time. So we have preamble, and the question it's answering is, what does the Constitution do and what's the purpose of government? In Article 1, we look at how does the legislative branch create laws. It also addresses what power states have. Article 2, how does the executive branch execute laws or enforce? Article 3, how does the judicial branch interpret the laws? Article 4, how should the states get along with each other? Article 5, we'll look at this again later. How can the Constitution be amended or changed? Article 6, this should be familiar to you. How does federalism work? Which law is supreme? This indeed is where we find our supremacy clause. Article 7, what steps have to be taken to make the Constitution the law of the land? Basically, that's just saying what has to happen for this to be ratified. And then our last one, what changes have been made to the Constitution is our amendments. Here's a great little review of the activity we just did. It's called article matchup. So instead of drawing a line, you're going to draw a line in your head, connecting each constitutional article with the subject that it covers. So in the left-hand column, what you see is Articles 1 through 3, Article 4, the amendments, Article 7, and Article 5. Oh, in Article 6, I don't really have any idea why they did it in this order. Okay, so let's look at number 13. It says, how states should interact with each other. Which one of our articles said that? If you got Article 4. If you got Article 4, great job. Number 14, the supreme law of the land. You should know this one. You should definitely know it. You got it? That's right, Article 6. Number 15 creates the 3 branches of the United States government. It's right at the top, Articles 1 through 3. What are our additions to the Constitution? Which one of these is it going to be? We got 3 choices left. Additions or amendments. Number 17, how to amend the Constitution. We're going to discuss this one more. And that is Article 5. And lastly, how to ratify the Constitution means officially approve, and that is Article 7. Hopefully that went well for you. All right, we're going to jump to Article 5 of the Constitution and look at the amendment process. So, step 1 is the proposal process. Remember, you can do it one of 2 ways. You can have it proposed by 2/3 of both houses of Congress, or you can have a national convention called by 2/3 of the state legislatures. Either way, step 1 is 2/3. Step 2, ratification. Remember, ratified means to officially allow something to happen. It's an official vote. It means you approve of it. So it is 3/4. Notice how that number got bumped up. So 3/4 of state legislatures or 3/4 of state conventions. So let me go back and look at that one more time. Remember, it is 2/3 in step 1 for the proposal. 2/3 of Congress or the state conventions have to propose it. And step 2, which we're looking at right now, is 3/4 of the state legislatures or state conventions have to ratify or officially approve of it. Let's look at the difference between formal and informal amendments. A formal amendment is exactly what it sounds like. It's an amendment that's gone through the normal process, the formal process. So 2/3 of Congress approved by 3/4 of the states, right? And we have 27 of these official amendments. Versus informal is just an action of the president that led to unofficial changes. And actually, that can be got rid of by the next president. So if it is an official change to the Constitution, then that can't be taken out unless the people choose to amend that amendment. Informal actions really just last as long as a president wants it to last. A great question to think about is how come they made it more difficult? How come they made it difficult to amend the Constitution? How come not just make it a majority, which would be 51%? Why make it 2/3 and then 3/4? And I think what you guys need to understand is that any amendment has a huge impact and sometimes has unintended consequences on what's going to happen. We want to make sure that they have a large support of the majority of the people. Not just a basic majority, not just a simple majority. We want a supermajority of either 2/3 or 3/4. Amendments are huge. They give us a lot of power, and so we're going to be going into amendments a lot more. I hope this video helped. Stay tuned for the next one coming out in a few days.